Okay, webinar is started, is now live.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking around for the last presentation of the day. I am Betsy Lazega. I'm one of the technical assistance providers for the Florida project. I am joined today by some of my colleagues, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you.
Okay.
First, we'll start with Brian.
Sounds good. Thank you, Betsy. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Gaunt, and I'm with the Florida PBIS project, and I'm a technical assistance provider working with about 6 districts here in Florida.
And good afternoon. I'm Sherry Wareka. I am the PBIS and bullying prevention specialist in Osceola County School District.
Hi, everyone. I also work at Osceola County School District, and I'm a research and evaluation specialist.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We all are going to be sharing with you today some of the ongoing work that we've been doing around data and problem solving at the district and state level. And so if you've been part of this strand for the past 2 sessions, we opened up with some of the tools that can help to assist with making these data and decision making, kind of evaluating your data and your decision-making practices by using the DSFI and the SSFI. And now this session is going to be kind of what happens with that data once you've sort of determined the things that are strengths and barriers. How do you use that to create your yearly implementation plans and goals as a state and as a district? So I'm going to get started with just some of those slides that are part of the forum. So we've already kind of gone through this one in terms of the expectations. So we hope that you will share with us in the polls and ask questions in the Q&A. And, you know, all of those good things we've already kind of covered. And again, we are here in Pathable. In my agenda, should you happen to kind of shift out of the session, which I've done a number of times inadvertently already, but don't worry, if you go back up to my agenda and then you join the session again, it should let you right back in. Same holds true if for some reason your sound starts to give you issues. I found that it's helpful to go back in and rejoin the session. This is kind of the screen where our session is housed, and I'm assuming most of you have been through this, but just so you know, there are screens there for chat, polls, people, and files, and we'll be using those today to kind of have conversations with each other, and also we'll give you a couple of polls as well. If you have a question, feel free to post that in the question and answers under polls, or you can respond in the chat. And there's just a little bit more information about where those can be found in our presentation. And again, for those more kind of specific questions, feel free to put those in the polls section. But if you're having trouble with sound or something technical, go ahead and post those in chat. Another good feature, if you haven't discovered it already, there is a top bar that has all of the different components to the sessions. There's also a help desk there and links to the social media. This is the help desk button, which can be very, very helpful if you're really having some tech issues and you need more support than we can give you within the session. Okay, we're going to come down a little bit to the nitty-gritty of what we'll be doing today. What we hope to provide for you today is an overview of what we do at the Florida Project, how we helped districts to support them in their kind of support that they provide to schools. So we'll show you a little bit of how that is structured. We'll also show you some of the state level tools that we are continuing to develop. It's always a work in progress. But those problem solving tools and practices that we're using at the state level to help provide that support to districts. And then we're going to show you this really great example from one of our awesome stellar districts, Osceola County, and how we've had that collaboration that has led to some of the practices that they are now working on at the district level. And those practices are around things like building more collaboration, having less silos within the districts, are all kind of coming together collaboratively to build buy-in for PBIS implementation and to integrate it into what we're doing overall in terms of academics and progress that we'd like to see for students. So before we get started with those learning objectives, we wanted to get a little sense of who you guys are. So we have some polls, and that first poll that you see there, and I'm hoping that Lauren is able to, oh, there we go. So I am going to just,
Yeah, Betsy, do you see that? We've got quite a few folks who've already responded to the poll.
awesome.
And it looks like you have about, the biggest number right now is about 40% district representation, and then 28% state level folks, 24% school, and around 10 or 11 district, as we have more folks respond, but those are around our same hovering answers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lauren. And I was able to pull it up, but for some reason it won't scroll. So if you could tell me what the annual plan results are, if people have annual plans, if they're working on annual plans.
All right, right now we have the majority, about 42 to 45% in the sort of category, and then split 30-30 right now with yes and no.
Okay, great. So that's very helpful to hear. And so we do have a number of people from state and a number of people from district. And I think we have a little bit for everybody in this presentation. Anything that we're talking about that involves problem solving, really, we can scope it. It could have the scope of being as enormous as, you know, national policy, and it could be as small as, you know, problem solving in your own home, like how you get your dogs to stop barking in the middle of a presentation. Oh, my goodness, excuse me for a second. Okay, so a little bit more about who we are. We are part of the Florida PBIS project, and what we do is we help to build capacity for school districts in Florida. And some of this information was presented in the last section, so I'm going to just really briefly go through. But what we do is we help with coaching, evaluation, and with district leaders. And one of those leaders is Sherry Waretka. She is our district coordinator in Osceola County. So each district, we ask that they have a district level representative who we communicate with to help build that capacity at the district level. And so what we'll do is provide training and technical assistance. And before we do all of that, we begin with an implementation plan. And so any of the training or technical assistance that we provide is what's supporting the goals and objectives that are in that plan. So we want to make sure that we're being very strategic in the kind of things that we offer, because it's very easy for us to want to just kind of do something that sounds good. You know, we have a lot of kind of buzzwords and keywords that may surface all the time, especially right now, you know, with trauma and restorative practices, and all of those are amazing projects and wonderful trainings, but we need to look at the data first to see what we're ready for, because if we're not ready for building capacity around restorative practices, but we offer those trainings, it's not really going to serve us well. If what we really need essentially is to start with that building buy-in and just an understanding of the system of PBIS. So that is kind of the way we frame our work. We are partners with a number of different projects, one being the National Center for PBIS, APBS, and of course the Florida Department of Education. We also partner with the Florida PSRTI project, which is our Florida Problem Solving Response to Intervention project. And they typically support more of the academic kind of end of MTSS, and we support more of that behavioral framework. And again, pbis.org is going to also have a number of resources on some of the topics that we're talking about today and that we've talked about in the previous 2 sessions around database decision-making and district and state PBIS. So I do encourage you to go there and look at some of those documents and resources for some more information. And here in Florida, we stay very busy. We've been around as a project since 2004. We have over 2,000 schools that have been trained. And as you can see, the dark green are the percent that they have, those are the districts that have over 90% of their schools trained. So we've got a lot of green, shades of green in there. So Florida really has embraced PBIS and does seem to want our assistance and training, which is a great thing, keeps us very busy. And then another picture that we wanted to show is, and this is from last year, but you can definitely see the trend going up in terms of schools reporting PBIS fidelity. So you get that one layer of schools wanting to be trained in that initial PBIS framework, which is awesome. But that next layer is, are we willing to go that next step and start to look at what we're doing, our practices, our strengths and weaknesses, and identify how well things are working for us. And so the number of schools that are submitting that data seems to be increasing over time. And especially in Florida, we have a really good percentage of schools that submit at least some fidelity data to our PBIS database, which tells us that not only are they attending the training, but then they're going back and really looking at how well they're implementing. And another layer to that is our model school process. And so we offer a model school award to schools, and they earn that award by showing both outcomes. So their outcomes are either maintaining or at least not getting any worse in terms of student outcomes. And then their fidelity, they're able to maintain a high level of fidelity. And we use the benchmarks of quality and the tiered fidelity inventory for schools to measure how well they're implementing. So those 2 pieces, along with looking at their equity in their disciplinary practices, is what helps schools to earn that model school status. And as you can see, at least over the past 5 years, we've really had a number of schools that have gone that extra step and shown that they're looking at their data in order to identify kind of what their needs are, and that they're feeling like they're confident enough in their practices to apply for that model school status. So where that starts, though, is really in the building of that district yearly plan. And that district plan helps to support the work that makes schools achieve that level of proficiency. So Brian is going to take over, and he's kind of start to dig deeper for us into what that yearly PBIS plan consists of.
Great, thank you so much, Betsy. So as Betsy mentioned, the mission of our project is to build the capacity of school districts to essentially increase their independent ability to monitor, evaluate, and address what they see as working and what's not working, to build up greater capacity and, of course, sustain those outcomes. And so when we think about yearly planning, there's kind of 2 functions that I just want to share as a stage setting here for how this benefits our project as well as the local school district. On the one hand, by engaging this annual review process together in collaboration with our partners at the district level, it allows our project to better understand what some of the needs are going forward for that particular school district, as well as all of our other districts. And so that allows us to, in advance, plan for the amount of resources and technical assistance services that might be required to help those districts to begin to move forward with those action steps. But the other side of that coin is to, again, go back to our mission statement. It's to build the capacity of those school districts. And so when we think about the purpose of annual planning here, this is a slide that we typically provide to our district folks and our members to better understand why we're there and what we hope to accomplish from this yearly implementation planning process. So the first, of course, is to build that commitment for systems change. One of the edicts, if you will, that we often report and share with our partners at the district level is every system is perfectly aligned for the outcomes it gets. And so if we're not happy with our outcomes, then let's think about system changes. Now, we don't want to make that just willy-nilly off the cuff. We really want to be strategic about that. We have limited finite resources. We have COVID pandemic conditions. We have a lot of issues that affect our abilities to make some changes, but we do want to be careful about those changes. So this is where we're going to get into reviewing our data and helping our districts, and in some cases, more guidance. In some cases, they're more independent at that, but teach them how to better distill that data. Now, when it comes to database decision-making, if you think about it, you ask about 100 different people what that means, what it looks like and sounds like to them, and you're likely to find a lot of variability in what people describe as database decision-making practices. What we try to do is to clean up some of that variability and clean up some of the guessing game around that and introduce structures that allow our teams to come in contact with evidence-based practices around effective use of data at this kind of global district level. And so we engage with them in that problem-solving process to address some of the barriers that they see that might be contributing to some of the priority concerns that they want to address that school year. It allows us to also demonstrate for them some of the resources and other technical assistance tools and resources that we have that could be leveraged to support them in helping to reach those action goals or otherwise those outcome goals that they have. And then another final piece to that, of course, is all of this work at this yearly implementation planning process results in a plan. And then that plan essentially allows us to not only monitor and allocate the resources we need to help them, but in some cases allows us to also outsource services and supports and collaborations with other discretionary projects in the state, particularly through the State Department of Education. And then of course, then help support the district in their efforts as well. Just gonna wait for the slide to advance. There we go. So the concept of our yearly implementation planning process is one in which we describe as kind of a systems coaching framework, where we come in as technical assistance providers at the state level and provide coaching supports to the district level. Those folks then build the capacity of their abilities to provide coaching supports and technical assistance down to the school leadership level, and then it goes down to the classroom level, and then with our stakeholders and family partners. And so the real focus of this yearly implementation planning process is to build a capacity in alignment with what we know in our PBIS blueprint drivers. So this team really needs to be set up to support all these different functions. So at the top, of course, has to do with that visibility, that long-range sustainability, that leadership accountability, as well as investment in PBIS practices. But below that, now we're getting into really the technical assistance services and structures that are within the school district to help support not only schools to get these PBIS practices up and running, but to engage in just scale up for tiers 2 and 3, engage in better quality services through continuous improvements, but also to sustain those efforts over time. At the core of all of this, of course, is beginning to help them to see where are you now with the way you're structured and the outcomes you're getting. Again, every system is perfectly aligned. And where would you like to be with those outcomes, and what are the implications for changes that we want to make in your district? So what we know about the research when it comes to highly successful districts, and many of our members at our project helped to contribute some of this research, is that when we think about high performing districts, we really are thinking about those districts that have been able to set the conditions for allowing schools to implement PBIS with strong fidelity. And so one of the biggest elements to that is having a centralized full-time equivalent person to really take care of and lead this PBIS effort at the district level. So we encourage, as part of assignment or otherwise coming on board with our project, is that that district has a centralized single person, a district coordinator. Now in some of our districts that have more resources than others, they're able to provide additional district coaches or co-coordinators as part of that team. But essentially we're dealing with one point of contact. And as technical assistance providers, it's our job to build their capacity to know how to do and engage in everything that we know how to do, thereby releasing us from more and more of that responsibility and building their capacity to do the work. So another element, of course, then is thinking about, sorry, wait for this slide to advance. There we go. I'm just gonna go ahead and advance them all. So coaches is another specific aspect to this. And so as we think about helping the school district to think of their outcomes, where they are now, and the kinds of outcomes they want to have a year from now or even down the road, we want to start thinking then strategically, what are some of those infrastructure gaps that might be contributing to or otherwise help us to explain why we have the outcomes we do. So we check to make sure that schools have the right supports. We check to make sure that the district team itself is set up to lead and not just simply react to some of the problems in schools. And then when we think about the team performance there, we're really getting into very logistical and specific activities that we would encourage them to follow with us as a kind of a standard protocol treatment, if you will. And then when we think about buy-in, that goes back to that upper level of our PBIS implementation blueprint. We want to make sure that there's a consistent effort to make sure that PBIS is connected to the larger school district's mission and vision, that it's not just a standalone, but it's part of their larger MTSS framework. And so really it's the outcomes we have, we're not happy with them. We want to have better outcomes. Here's the goal we'd like to reach the next year. These are the things that are going well for us, and these are the resources and infrastructures that we have in place. But we believe that these are some of the issues that are affecting us from having better outcomes. We need more structures, we need to rechange some of those structures, or we need to enhance some of our supports to schools. So this process really helps us to begin to direct those supports to schools in a very strategic way. It's not kind of that kitchen sink approach where you throw everything at it and just see what sticks. School districts have very limited resources. Our project has limited resources. And what we try to do is to reduce some of the noise around decision-making by anchoring everything down into student outcome data. So as we think about then this process, what you're going to start to get some exposure here in the next few minutes is this idea of how do you embed into this planning process a structured problem-solving approach to linking data to systems changes. So I mentioned already about the fact that we have this yearly implementation meeting process where the district team is going to meet now. All of the members are going to contribute to understanding where we are in relation to where we want to be. And also all members are going to contribute to the design of some hypotheses or some assumptions about what might be the barriers affecting our ability to get better outcomes. And it's those barriers that we will then dig into with additional data, perhaps, to better understand the actions we need to take to remove those barriers for better outcomes. So we're going to identify our goals very specifically early on in the process based on the priority decisions we want to make. We're going to provide some resources as well as to, lean on the district to help us with collecting data to evaluate what's working and what's not with our efforts to improve. And again, think about some of those infrastructures along the way in terms of personnel to help support and coach or otherwise guide schools in implementation efforts based on our planning decisions. So our YIP process essentially has 4 phases. And I want to highlight for you that this is a very recent addition. This is on the tail end now of some work that we've been doing for about 1.5 years. Over the past several years before that, much of our YIP process was very much similar to the way it is now, very structured, very kind of driven in terms of kind of linking data to outcomes. But what we've tried to do in this phase of our YIP process design is to enhance the level of that problem identification and problem analysis step, if you will, is to help districts to have an even greater capacity for really getting into the intricacies of defining their problems anchored in a variety of different outcomes of student performance they can look at, and then beginning to think about then the structured approach to using some hypothesis development and generation, as well as looking at how to validate those to look at strategies that we want to employ. So this 4-phase process is something I'm going to describe in the next few slides. And in each of those, I'm going to be highlighting some of the connectedness of our resources and our project and how we support the district, but how we're building capacity along the way. So when we start the process, it's really just a relationship between our staff person, in this case me, and my district coordinator at a given district. Now, if the district is brand new to us, we do have some additional features to this process that are a lot more hand-holding kind of approaches. We really have a lot of build-up, a lot of let's just get these things immediately in place. And there's a lot of let's just take our time to learn how to do this and then eventually become more fluent. So when it comes to new districts, certainly a lot more careful attention. But for our existing school districts, what we try to do each year is engage in this continuous improvement approach where we look at some common sources of information across all of our districts to better understand where they're at in their existing infrastructures and components to support practices at schools. So we have a district engagement rubric that we use, and annually we, as staff members, evaluate our districts using this rubric. And that rubric then in turn provides a source of information for us to know where certain districts are at presently with regards to certain structures. We also engage in a district coordinator interview with them. And a lot of that interview is a series of guiding questions that are structured around the kind of elements that we saw in our PBIS blueprint. So in that blueprint, we're trying to get a sense from the district coordinator, what do they perceive is the value of PBIS in the district? Is there enough upper level cabinet support for it? Is there strong visibility, for example, in school policies and mission statements? Is it being talked about in school board meetings, for example? And then going below the leadership team level, what right now are your training capacities? What are your calendar and resources for professional development? What do you have in place of coaches and the number of coaches? At each school, you have a point of contact, but what is your system of supporting those points of contacts through professional learning? So we engage them in a lot of those kinds of questions in that interview process. We then at that point are at an optional level, particularly with our newer districts, could provide them a district survey to understand better the structures for specifically PBIS to get a sense of those present levels. But the depth of this process also depends on what other external factors are affecting the district. So in the state of Florida, for example, many of our districts are monitored through the special education department as part of a federal effort to ensure increased quality and accountability for special education services. And so each state is monitoring a series of indicators, and those indicators are translated down into LEA versions. So if any one of our districts is on the hook, for example, on a state indicator such as disproportionate outcomes for students and discipline, then that would be a priority that we would include in this year process. So now moving into that next phase of our YIP process, the district coordinator and myself will begin to engage in that first step of problem solving. Now, for many states, there could be already a model of problem solving that is promoted throughout the State Department of Education, or perhaps at the local level, your district has a model they've adopted. In the state of Florida, we have what's called the Guiding Tips for Instructional Problem Solving. And this provides us a common language, if you will, and a common understanding for how to talk about the concerns and the issues that are happening in our schools across different departments and different levels of our system. So at this problem identification step, or this very first step, it's really just a simple conversation of where are we now in relation to where we want to be? And we want to make all of that conversation, of course, observable and measurable. So we're going to really think about, in terms of, for example, last year's data. Many of our YIP meetings typically occur or take place in the summertime. Some do occur throughout the rest of the school year, but many of them will occur in the summertime to set the stage for the next school year. So we'll be looking at last year's data and analyzing the patterns within that data. We're going to start with whole district kinds of aggregate data. We're going to disaggregate across ethnic groups and high-risk profile populations. Then we'll get into disaggregating across school types. We'll disaggregate across grade levels. And we'll keep continuing to disaggregate until we've identified all the possible concerns that stand out in that data. Now, at this point, the district coordinator and myself have taken inventory of what's currently in place structurally in the district. We've analyzed previous and historical data around what's working and what's not in terms of the outcomes. And we're ready to now provide the rest of the members of the district team a summary report of where we stand as a district. And as part of that report, the district coordinator is going to be providing the district team his or her recommendations for what she or he thinks are some of the priorities we need to address as a team. And this is where really it's just that importance of understanding how problem solving works. You're likely in every scenario, every year of planning, you're going to find many more problems than you probably have the resources or time to address. Our effort in this first round with the district coordinator is to limit the amount of time that's required on the rest of the members to have to engage in this process. So the district coordinator having a full-time position here, us having a full-time position to do the work, we can certainly expend the resource time to do that. But now we want to provide them a summary of here's what the data is telling us. However, we provide the summary report to the district members along with graphic data reports. And the team members have a chance to review all that information before coming to the face-to-face meeting. It's at that face-to-face meeting then that we're going to want to understand if everybody agrees with the priorities the district coordinator came up with, if there are other priorities the district team members feel that we need to address. And at the end of this conversation, or just as we're getting into the meeting, we're addressing then the consensus around the team members, around what are the one or two priorities that we really want to face around our problem solving efforts. So when faced with a lot of different problems at the district level, what we try to do is to consolidate those so there's no one concise particular problem, that if we take care of that, it's going to have a momentum or a watershed effect over all the other concerns we have, and thereby give us the biggest bang for our buck. Now, once we've identified what that problem is or that priority, and we stated it in observable and measurable terms, now as a team, we're able to start thinking about what are some of the assumptions about why this is happening to us? Why is that particular priority happening? Why are 75% of our schools showing disproportionate outcomes for African-American students? And so having a very targeted focus, now we can begin to analyze very specific barriers that are relevant to that issue. And so they're using the data report that's given to them as far as the problem identification, and we facilitate them, the district coordinator or us. Now, this is an important feature here, is that we as a technical assistance provider, having the skills and knowledge to do this work, certainly we can come in and facilitate this particular part of the meeting. What we want to do is to build the capacity of our district coordinators to also learn how to do that. So again, this is a relationship that we have with our district coordinators that on a one-to-one basis really becomes a negotiation that we take year after year. How much more comfortable do you feel taking this piece on this year versus where you were last year? But either way, the problem analysis step is facilitated. The team members contribute hypotheses. In some cases, we have the data to verify if any of those hypotheses hold water. But in some cases, we might need to have some follow-up. And all of this is to, of course, lead into, of the hypotheses or assumptions we have evidence to prove or justify as a concern, now we can begin to develop actions to address those. How do we remove some of those valid concerns or barriers that if we do, is going to help us to reach our goal of improving, in the case of the example I shared, improved equity of our students. So all that culminates in our action plan. We have valid hypotheses that have been identified. We have sources of information to justify those valid hypotheses. We're recognizing the need for supporting accountability. So we're going to build a very detailed plan. The more detail you build in, the better. Instead of identifying that the district coordinator will do, or the assistant superintendent will do, let's put people's names. And instead of saying October 2020, let's say October 23rd, 2020. So the more specificity we provide in these plans, obviously the greater accountability for measuring our progress through the year in terms of the fidelity of this plan. Now, as part of that fidelity monitoring, of course, we want to schedule checkups. So we want to have in advance a series of meetings already pre-planned throughout the school year with the team to come in and simply just check to see how are we doing with our action steps according to the timeline that we set, and what existing information are we collecting from schools that might help us to see any impacts currently. So this process is, as you can probably imagine or get a sense of, is pretty intense. The meetings themselves, we try to do a lot of the busy work outside that meeting, roughly about 2 hours worth of meeting time with our district folks once a year. But as you can see, there's a lot of work that we take care of before the meeting as well as after the meeting. Now, to help kind of exemplify some of the work that we engage in to support our districts and to help them to take the lead on engaging in the implementation of PBIS, but more importantly, integrating that into the fabric of everything they do in their schools, I'm really happy to introduce to you now the presenters from our Osceola School District. And they're going to share with you their case story and some of the things that they're working on currently as a result of the supports that we've been providing. So I'm going to turn it over now to, I think, Ashley?
Sherry's going to start us off.
Sherry, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And I want to thank Brian and Betsy for inviting Ashley and I to be part of this. So I took over PBIS. I became the lead several years ago and wanted to go out to schools to visit, to actually see what was happening on campus. So as I went out, it looks like our PowerPoint has disappeared. But as I went out, I noticed some trends that I noticed in the schools. And some of those trends were, hopefully we're going to get the PowerPoint back up. It'll just be patient for a minute. But some of the trends were lack of visibility of school-wide expectations. Some of the staff and the students I noticed did not know the expectations. So the training I felt like was very limited. And then the school teams sometimes weren't meeting, or if they were meeting, they didn't have clear action plans of what they needed to accomplish or what the vision was for what they wanted to accomplish that year. So as I'm looking at this and visiting these schools, I was reminded even in our general session of Dr. Sagai, who said that you could have posters all on the walls and all over campus, but that doesn't necessarily mean that PBIS is actually happening. And that's pretty much what I saw in our schools. So I was clearly overwhelmed by this. Felt like I was the only person that was on board with PBIS as far as at the district level, and that was very hard to handle. So the teacher in me, obviously I like to be in control, but I realized I can't do it myself. So I'm reminded, if you could advance the slides, just 2 more, I believe. Thank you. I was reminded of, you can do it one more time, thanks. I was reminded by one of the technical assistant specialists that I used to work with. She's now moved to another state, Dia Davis, and she made the suggestion that I develop a subcommittee. And so basically that was the district level PBIS team. And so I invited directors from all the different levels in curriculum, student services, ESE, our multicultural department, and research and accountability. And I asked these people to come together. We meet once a month. We talk about our action plan that we've established for the school year that Brian was explaining, and talk about trends that we're noticing based on discipline data and how we really can support the schools. So having all of those people on board, we really decided, oops, it looks like we're having some problem with our PowerPoint, and I apologize for that. But what we really decided is that we needed to really hold our schools accountable. And I know one of the things that we often say in education is that academics and behavior are tied together and we can't separate them. The hard thing is that it's very hard to let schools realize how they really are impacted together. And so what we've done in Osceola is we actually took the Florida PBIS project has some standards that they set for model school that Betsy talked about. And what we did is in Osceola County with our team, my team, we decided to make it a little bit more rigorous, to hold schools a little bit more accountable. And we really wanted to tie in that academic piece as well as the attendance piece, so that schools would not only have to just show a decrease in referrals, because sometimes we can show a decrease in referrals, but that may not be reflected in all other aspects of our school. And then if it's not, then what we need to do is we need to see what's really going on. So if schools are really reducing discipline referrals and students are in class, they're not being excluded for whatever reason, our academic data should show that, our attendance data should show that. So that's what we did on Osceola County, is we really worked to change that so that we could see a lot more of those academic and behavior ties, and schools could actually see that. So one of the things that we did, and hopefully we'll be able to get our PowerPoint up and going soon, is that I worked with research and accountability. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in our, there's the model school criteria. So you can see some of the descriptions we put up there and how we wanted our schools to be more rigorous. But one of the things that we talk about a lot in education is developing relationships. And I've heard that even in several of the sessions I've been in the conference. And so one of the things that I felt was necessary is that I build relationships with the people at the district level, as well as my school-based people. And so one of the relationships that I've been able to build is with Ashley Pierce. And Ashley works in our research and accountability department. And she's able to take the data that we get from all areas, and she's going to share that with you. And then we can talk about that at our point of contact meetings, when I'm meeting with schools, and we can see those connections. And if you advance to the next slide. One of the reports that Ashley and her team actually put together is a comprehensive discipline report. And this report is really putting it in the school's hands, what they need to be looking at. And even in some of the sessions I've heard about how important it is in looking at data, but sometimes schools, they don't have time to access the data and they have to go to all these different places. So what I'm very thrilled, and I feel very blessed that I have Ashley on my team to pull those things together so that it's really accessible for the schools. So every meeting that the schools have, they can look at this and they can access the data. And then we do it obviously together as well. So I'll let Ashley kind of take it from here to talk about the comprehensive discipline report.
Hi, and thank you. So about a year ago, I was at one of Sherry's PBIS committees, and we were brainstorming how can we get our administrators to really buy into PBIS or just see more value in PBIS. And we know that all of our administrators place a large emphasis on academics and everything related to school improvement. So we felt that if we could show a connection between behavior and academics, we could get more buy-in. And so that's where not only this report came from that I'm going to go over with you, but also the rest of the data in the subcoming slides. So this is our comprehensive discipline report. I worked with one of our computer programmers. So this wasn't like a platform that we purchased or anything. It was actually just built with SQL code. So each one of these links over here is actually a tab to its own report. So I'm just going to highlight a few. The first one, the demographics tab, is the one that's displaying now. It just shows the school's demographics overall. So nothing specific on there with discipline or referrals. But it does tell you that at this particular school, there's 52% males, 49% females, and a good breakdown of several indicators. If we're live in the site and a school would click on referral summary, it would show them a similar screen to this, but by referrals. So at that point, the school could see what percent of the referrals are going to male students versus female students. And the same thing with ethnicity and race. So that's where in our conversation we have with the schools, if they see something like males are making up 70% of the referrals, but they're only 52% of the population, that's when we start to look at the groups and consider any changes that we can make. The ISS OSS is for in-school and out-of-school suspension, the same thing. The report breaks our suspension data down by demographics so we can compare to overall. And the other report that I want to highlight on here is students with referrals with D's and F's. So that's been one of our most popular reports, especially that we're talking to our schools this school year, because it really shows the connection between academics and discipline. When a school pulls that report, they're pulling the students that have D's and F's, but they're also pulling the students then that have referrals. And often there's a connection between those two populations and two groups of students. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So as I was saying in the beginning, our focus was to try to find the connection between academics and behavior, academics and discipline, so that we could show our schools and kind of get buy-in to show them that if you are really addressing behaviors, then it can improve academics as well. So this first slide with our discipline data shows elementary English language arts state assessment data. So when I did the analysis, I broke the groups into students with 5 or more referrals and students with less than 5 referrals. So what you're seeing here is data from 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade, and the average scale score on our state assessment. So in every case for 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the group with 5 or more referrals, that scale score equates to a level 2. And the groups with less than 5 referrals, that scale score equates to a level 3. And that's pretty significant in Florida because a 2 is not considered grade level, but a 3 is. And even, especially with our high stakes on this test, 3rd grade, you can move on to the next grade if you have a 3 on the 3rd grade ELA. So pretty significant, not only statistically, but just in terms of the impact. You can get to the next one. Middle and high school ELA, we see very similar trends. There's always a significant gap when I did the study between groups with 5 or more referrals and less than 5 referrals. And in most cases, it's the situation where the students with 5 or more referrals are scoring below grade level, and the students with less than 5 referrals are scoring on grade level. So elementary math, we see a similar trend that we did with elementary ELA. There's always a difference where the group with more than 5 referrals scored lower than the group with less than 5. We do see the trend to be a little different in some grades than others, just meaning a larger gap. So 3rd grade on that chart, you can see there's a larger gap between the groups with more than 5 referrals and less than 5 than the other 2 grades. But in every grade, we still see a significant difference. Middle and high school math, the same thing. There's a large gap, especially if you look over to high school on our algebra and geometry state assessments. So in addition to looking at state testing, we looked at the same analysis or similar analysis with NSGRA. So NSGRA is used to measure reading levels. One of the reasons why we wanted to look at this in NSGRA, in addition to just getting another data point to see if the data says the same thing, is because our state testing in Florida starts in 3rd grade, but NSGRA we give in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd as well. So we were able to get a more broader picture for elementary. So the data that you're looking at is for our elementary schools. It was last school year. It's the NSGRA percent or on or above grade level by referrals. So when we just make a simple graph by referrals, you can see that the more referrals, the lower the percentage of students on grade level are. So students with 0 referrals, 54% of them were on grade level for reading. But students with 7 to 9 referrals, only 27% were on grade level for reading. So the lowest 25. So in Florida, we have part of our school accountability system keeps track of how the students in the lowest 25th percentile perform. So meaning looking at the scores from the prior year, if we take the students who were the lowest 25th percentile, schools are graded on how do those particular students perform. So that was just the background, but the analysis I did was an odds ratio, and it revealed that the odds of a student who's in the lowest 25 having 5 or more referrals is 3 times greater than the odds of a student who's not in the lowest 25. So basically just another way to see the connection between academics and behavior. Here's some more detailed examples with this. So the top chart for elementary, students in the lowest 25 have on average 0.1 referrals. So that is similar to students not in the lowest 25 for elementary, but the days absent is different. So students in the lowest 25 miss an average of 5.8 days of school, and students not in the lowest 25 miss an average of 4.3 days of school. And I'll just note, this was done around the 100th day of school last year. It was kind of our last big spring analysis before our schools went digital. And then middle and high school, there's a difference in referrals. Students in the lowest 25 had an average of 1.5 referrals. Not in the lowest 25 had 0.7. And we also see the difference in attendance, with students in the lowest 25 missing 5.5 days and students in the not in the lowest 25 missing 5.1. And then you can see the column with the period attendance is varied as well. So acceleration. This is another component of Florida school grade. The expectation from our state when it comes to school grade is that all graduating high school students earn an acceleration point. And you can earn an acceleration point by passing an AP test, an IB test, an industry certification exam, or a dual enrollment course. So I did an analysis on our 18-19 cohort because we had complete data from that group. And we looked at days absent and referrals. So the average days absent for the students who earned an acceleration point, they missed about 5.6 days of school. That's in the whole school year. versus those that did not earn an acceleration point missed 10.5 days of school. So close to double. And then the breakdown on the right two columns is just based on students who attempted the acceleration point versus did not. That would mean attempted would be they were enrolled in the AP course, but they didn't pass the test. But then when we look at referrals, students who earned an acceleration point had an average of 2.3 referrals. Students that did not earn the point had an average of 2.5 referrals. Go ahead to next. Okay. So it's looking more in attendance as we did on the previous slide. We started to do more analysis with NSGRA with attendance because it started to be significant in our studies. So this graph displays by days absent the percent of students on grade level for the NSGRA, which was the reading level. So students that missed 0 to 4 days absent had 53% of them on grade level for reading, versus students who missed more than 15 days had 43% on grade level. So in general, the more days the students miss, the less percentage of students that were on grade level. Here's some case studies. So Sherry and I shared these when we met with her PBIS contacts at each school. So she was having one of her meetings and I came in and we went over this data with the schools, and then we asked them how could they help these students. So the student at the top, this was what we gave the elementary group when they came in. The student was in 4th grade. The student's prior year state testing for math was a level 1. The student had 1 referral and 12 days absent. So we posed the question just to the group, you know, what does this information tell you and how could you help the student? And then the example that we posed for secondary is below that. The student was in 9th grade. Prior year math score was a level 1. The student had 9 referrals, 31 days absent, 184 periods, and then specifically 37 of those periods they missed were their algebra class. So pointing out to the group that the student was already previously had scored a level 1 in math, and now this student had missed 37 periods of algebra. So we talked about how could we help that student, building relationships with that student, and any other interventions that we could add to that current MTSS process. So the last research studies that I'm going to share with you were about students who consistently score a level 1. So we have a problem of practice, I'll call it, in our district where out of the students who scored a level 1 on our FSA math assessment in 17-18, 70% of them scored a level 1 again on FSA math in 18-19. So in other words, 70% of the students really weren't moving a level. And I know in Florida, we have where schools can get learning gains if students move partial a level. But in the end, the ultimate goal is to still be on grade level, which is a level 3. So if our level 1 students, 70% of them are still staying a level 1, that's definitely concerning. So the chart shows the differences between the groups. Students who scored a level 1 is on the left column for just the 1 year. And then students who scored a level 1 for the 2 years in a row is the column to the right. So in addition to just making this table where we can see, you know, that there was a difference in referrals of 1.1 to 1.3, I did the statistical analysis with this, and a regression analysis revealed that ELL, ESE, days absent, and number of referrals were all statistically significant predictors of scoring a level 1 for 2 years in a row. So again, we see referrals and attendance being huge predictors. You can go ahead to the next one. Oh, so one of these, the slides were this is the FSA ELA. So the last study I shared was math, but we basically had the same problem in ELA and we found the same thing. So in ELA, we still had the same situation. 70% of our students were scoring a level 1 year and then scoring a level 1 the next year. And the analysis came out similar. A regression found that gender was significant in this one and it wasn't in math, but gender, ELL, ESE, days absent, and number referrals were statistically significant predictors of scoring a level 1 for the second year in a row.
Thank you so much, Ashley and Sherry, for sharing that amazing data. It's so great to see how you could use that to really problem solve and make connections between what we're doing in PBIS in our behavioral systems building and what we want to do academically. I think the more that we can make that connection at the district level, the easier it will be for schools to make it at school level. And it really highlights the importance of the work that we do around PBIS. I'm going to show you a couple more slides here. This is our webpage. So if you go to Florida or flpbis.org, we have a ton of resources around district level planning and also around all things PBIS. So we have webinars that we host monthly that you can access the recorded archived versions. We also have lots of resources on foundational PBIS topics at the district and state level. Definitely go and check out everything there. And I was talking about those TA chats, the webinars. They can be found in our online learning section. We also have developed some new skill modules around a bunch of different topics. So there are ones on integrating SEL and PBIS, restorative practices. I believe there are some on problem solving as well. So Brian could probably tell you a little bit more about that. And in the middle of our page, you will find a chat schedule, which will show our upcoming chats, and they're free for anyone to watch throughout the country. So feel free to check it out. I am going to turn it over to Brian because my dogs are going absolutely insane. So Brian, you want to close us out and open the questions and answers?
That sounds good, Betsy.
Thank you.
I appreciate the assumption that I'm also not going insane over here. So everyone, thank you so much for your attention today. We'd like to now at this point go ahead and open up for questions and answers, and just have a dialogue and see if there's anything that we could troubleshoot with you, or if you have questions for our district presenters about how they're engaged in that work, what steps they might take next.
So Brian, this is Lauren. You do have a couple of Q&As that came in.
Okay.
So the first one would be, I believe, for probably Sherry and for Ashley. Is there a way for the comprehensive discipline report to be shared so that it can be replicated, or is there a way that they can get more details on how it was built?
Sure. I'm not sure. I'd have to talk with Betsy and Brian, like what our process is of actually sharing out to the participants if we're putting information on the site, or how it'll actually be distributed. But I can get some more details together for you and just some more examples of what the other tabs look like.
That was a very popular question. So great. Thank you, Ashley. There also is just some more questions about sharing the resources that were mentioned, like the district engagement rubric, the district coordinator interview, the DC guiding questions form.
Yeah, so I'll speak to some of that, but Betsy, certainly check my work here. So again, as I mentioned, we do have some yearly implementation planning resources that are available on our website, flpbis.org. Some of the work that we share with you here in this presentation is literally brand new, hot off the press. So you won't see that just yet on our website, but much of what is on there is pretty well intact with how we're going forward. Again, some of what we're building going forward, which we hope to have available soon here within the next half school year, are additional resources and structures that can help teams to better isolate some of those practices around using their data like you saw our district provide here. What other questions we have?
Nothing to add. I think that was a perfect answer.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Oh,
please.
absolutely. Yeah.
I would definitely say that having the Florida PBS project as a support is amazing. The resources that they have on their website are all encompassing. You could pretty much find any single topic you could ever dream of and find tons of resources. So Betsy is my technical assistant specialist, so she supports me, and I can honestly say it's hard whenever you are one of the only people at your district, and I'm sure some of you are in the same boat as me, where you're trying to bring to light the discipline issues, but then academics is always first and foremost. So it really is helpful to have that team that you can rely on to just bounce ideas, sometimes just vent to, but I'll obviously get a lot of support. So I'm super grateful for the project for providing that level of support for me.
Thanks, Sherry.
Sherry's fantastic, as is
Yes,
Ashley.
she
And
is.
so we've had a couple of questions just saying, could the process exemplars specifically be emailed to all of the participants? I'm not sure that that can happen, but I do know that we likely can upload the files to that files tab even after the session is over. This session is recorded and it will be available just a couple of minutes after we finish today. And those files will be available there too. So that might be a nice way to upload some of those extra things that people are asking about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren.
And I think that's all that I have as questions that have yet to be answered.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sticking around today. And thank you, Sherry and Ashley, for volunteering to share the work that's going on in Osceola. We appreciate it so much. And we hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you all for being a part of it.
Yes, thank you for inviting us.